This is Social Science Bites with me, Nigel Warburton.
And me, David Edmonds.
Social Science Bites is a series of interviews with leading social scientists, made in association with SAGE.
Before setting out on a series of interviews on the social sciences, some rather fundamental questions need addressing. What is social science? How do the social sciences differ from the so-called hard sciences, like physics and chemistry? Can social science be held to the same standards of rigour, and can we expect it to be predictive and falsifiable? Who better to answer these questions than polymath Harre, a distinguished philosopher, psychologist and social scientist.
Harre, welcome to Social Science Bites.
Hello, nice to be with you all.
The topic we're going to focus on is what is social science? Could you just give a broad definition of what social science is?
Well, it's pretty hard to do that, but we could start with the idea that everybody lives in a society. That is, they live in families, they live in towns, and they live in nations. And of course, they want to know what it is they're living in. And suddenly, about 2,000 years ago, someone, Aristotle, stepped back and asked himself, let's look at this world that we live in. It's a bit like fish discovering the sea. There we are living in a society. Suddenly we can start to ask ourselves, what is it and how does it work?
But that, in a way, is the kind of question that some historians ask themselves. What is the nature of the world that we live in relation to the way it has been? But most people don't think of history straightforwardly as a social science.
Well, gradually over the centuries, sociology and economics has come to be the study of contemporary society. So there is, of course, a historical sociology where we ask ourselves what life was like in the society of the Middle Ages or the society of medieval Japan. And gradually these two aspects have come closer and closer together. In the kind of work I do, I wouldn't dream of attempting to study a contemporary phenomenon without studying its historical antecedent. Years ago, my students and I did a study of football hooliganism. And when we were working out the sort of theory behind this, we thought, let's look in the past and see when similar things happened. Apprentice riots in London, the battles between the supporters of the different teams of horse racing in ancient Rome, it's happened before. So sociology opens up into the past. And of course, some people think it ought to open up into the future.
So it's got a clear relation to the past, and you said it involves focusing on social relations. It's also got the sense of it being a science, and I wondered what you see the relationship between the social sciences and the natural sciences to be.
Both are in the same kind of enterprise. That is, they're trying to give us a picture of how things are in some domain of the universe. The difference is that the social sciences are concerned with something we make ourselves. We create societies. But of course, we don't create the solar system. We don't create the Hadron Collider. Or we do create that, but we don't create the particles it's studying. But in sociology, we're looking at our own work, our own artifact. We make it.
So does that add special problems in terms of achieving an impersonal stance or repeatable experiments?
There's one enormously important problem in dealing with sociology and social sciences generally. Because we create this, we have to ask ourselves, what's the instrument with which we create it? In the last 50 or 60 years, language has come to be seen to be the key element in all of this. Now, once again, sociology and some other aspect of the human sciences, particularly linguistics, sociolinguistics, psycholinguistics, gets into the story. You can't draw a sharp separation. For example, if you want to understand the sociology of life in France, you better understand the grammatical difference between tu and vous.
That's really intriguing. Obviously, language isn't the only means of cultural transmission, so must be many other ways into the social sciences.
Well, there are lots of other means, and some of these are very small scale. We don't even notice. Terms of address, costume, hairstyles, flags, monuments. If you're an American, the Lincoln Monument at the end of the mall It's a gigantic chunk of marble. If anybody wants to say anything of importance in the United States, like Martin Luther King, they go to the Lincoln Memorial. There it is, America personified. So there are all kinds of these other carriers of social reality.
Let's go back to the science question. How do the social sciences relate to other sciences?
Well, it's first of all a matter of method. By and large, social scientists and natural sciences are into the same game. They're trying to find or develop a system of classification, the sort of categories that you need to identify what it is you're studying. Then you need to try to develop an explanatory theory, how it came about, that things happen the way they do. And of course, in the natural sciences, you build working models, either in the laboratory or in your head, as to how the world goes. In social sciences, you try to do the same thing. However, you are part of the operation. So if you're making a working model of some aspect of social life, say family life, or say diagnostic activities in a clinic, that in itself is a piece of social life. The first thing you have to learn if you're trying to do social science is the art of stepping back. Stepping forward and stepping back. You have to be a participant observer in one sense to have a sense of what's going on. And then you have to step back and pretend you're not part of that reality, to take a bird's eye view of it. This is why I think it's so important to think back to Aristotle. He was the first to step back and study the constitutions of the Greek states as an enterprise, but he was a member of a Greek state, and he was seeing it within his own frame of reference, and of course within his own language. One further point of this: English is the language of sociology. It used to be German, then it was French, now it's English. I go to dozens and dozens of countries. I've been all over the world. Everywhere I go, except in South America, English is the lingua franca of the academic world. The social force of English is becoming part of the topic of sociology.
When we look back at the social scientists of the 19th century, we can see their biases easily, and they seem to have all the assumptions of imperialism or whatever their background set of beliefs is. In the present, it's quite difficult sometimes to be aware of our own biases. I mean, how would a social scientist go about eliminating or allowing for those sorts of prejudices?
Well, now I think we're very aware that those prejudices exist. So one of the things you start training people when they're undergraduates and doing a course in this kind of thing is to get them to have a sense of their own world. I'm just about to set off to the States to teach a course in qualitative psychology, which is largely concerned with social matters. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have an exercise in standing back and asking themselves, what is it to be a member of Georgetown University? Don't take it for granted that you already know.
With the natural sciences, we often have the possibility of repeating experiments, manipulating variables, so we can get very accurate information about what's going on. If you were investigating an outburst of violence at a particular football match, you couldn't just go back and then start tweaking the variables. I mean, what does the social scientist do in that sort of situation?
Well, there's a long-running controversy. It became quite bitter in social psychology about whether the experimental method has any place at all in the social world. I'm one of those who's very suspicious of the attempt to hammer social life into shape in a laboratory with 3 or 4 people to try to replicate the social behaviour of millions. I think it's just a huge mistake. Of course, that throws the ball back in your court. How do you produce useful, valuable material that's not other than just vignettes of the passing scene? So you're trying to slide upwards a little bit towards some sort of level of generality. The way that people act in families, it's enormously different all over the world, but there are going to be certain sorts of commonalities. The great mistake in the past, I think, particularly in social psychology, was to presume that you knew what the commonalities were, and then you could simply go around and see how many cultures fitted those commonalities. The nuclear family. We'll take the nuclear family to New Guinea, we'll take it to Zimbabwe. It's not much good doing that, because when you get there, there isn't anything that really very much like the nuclear family. All the boys in New Guinea, or the Celebes or somewhere like that, when they're 9, they leave mum and go to live with dad, and they don't see mum again for years and years. It's a very different sort of life. So we have to be very cautious about the extent to which we generalise.
There's obviously a certain amount of descriptive work done in the social sciences, but it's often meant to be predictive of how people will behave, not just account for how they have behaved. How do you make that move from the past to the future?
Well, it's extremely problematic. And notoriously, social scientists, economists and so on are very bad at doing this, because the amount of variation of human society is simply enormous. Things happen which we haven't the faintest expectation that they will. For example, the last 7 or 8 years of chaos in the banking system. Who could have imagined that such a thing would happen? How is it possible for intelligent people to do the things they did? They were highly educated, well-established, brilliant people, all the technology in the world, and they didn't have a clue.
So what is the value of social science research then?
Well, I think it does give you a grasp of the world as it is at this moment, or rather as it was a little while ago. And, of course, that's not a bad thing. Those who know no history are doomed to repeat it. But there's no guarantee that that's going to function like Newton's laws of motion do. There's a kind of intuition that really brilliant social analysts or brilliant politicians are able to draw on, in which they're drawing on millions and millions of tiny pieces of data, organising it somehow, coming up with a sense of what's going to happen.
Now, there's been a huge change in the sources of data for social scientists in recent years with the growth of the internet and this movement for people to put statistics and data freely available online. How is that changing the nature of the social sciences?
I think it may have a profound effect on sociology. It's a kind of despair. The huge amount of data, the equipment you would need to search this. And I think we might find ourselves going back to more micro-studies again, looking at how particular groups of people, quite small groups, function.
It strikes me that the best social scientists are also very skillful narrators. They know not just what's going on, but they can tell the story in an interesting way that can reach a much wider public.
Well, yes, the very great sociologists can tell stories. In fact, that's another aspect of contemporary sociology, the idea of narratology, looking at the way in which people can build their lives around stories, storylines. So one of the most recent specialities is called positioning theory. The sociologist studies the way people assign rights and duties to each other in terms of the stories that they persuade each other to believe and tell. For instance, if you're thinking about a family quarrel, then you might think about it in terms of the story of that particular family, how mum and dad came to meet, what's the history of their ancestry, the sort of things you see on the television, people going back, they find a family story. Gee, isn't it amazing? This is the story of my family. And of course that is going to feed into the family itself and transform it, as discovering your ancestors is a way of changing the lives of your successors, because now there's a whole new story to tell.
Given that the social sciences aren't always great predictors of what's going to happen because of the persistence of the unforeseen in human affairs, how can you tell good sociology, good social science from bad?
Well, again, that's very difficult to do. There's very little place for the method you would use in the natural sciences. One way that has been talked about quite a bit over the last 20 or 30 years is bringing it back to the people who you are investigating and asking them, does this illuminate your life? It's a kind of psychiatry on a large scale, where you bring the story back to the person who came to you with anxiety or sufferings of various kinds, and the person becomes convinced. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's a matter of conviction, of making sense of things. Years and years ago, a group of us began to ask the question about plays. Are plays sociology? A very well-known sociologist, the late Stanford Lyman, thought they were. And he devoted quite a lot of time to studying the plays of Shakespeare, seeing Shakespeare as sociology. His idea was that the people of the time found Shakespeare convincing because he was telling stories that they recognized as the stories of their lives. So the way Hamlet and Ophelia behave is something that they recognize. So that's one way in which we can tell good sociology from bad. If you don't recognize it as part of your life or life of people you know, it's not much good.
Social science is often thought of as including most anthropology, a lot of psychology, economics, sociology. Is there anything common to all these different enterprises?
Well, the one thing that is in common is their attempts to understand a group of people and how they behave. Human society is very complex, so there's any number of different aspects of this. We've said nothing about medicine. We've said nothing about epidemics. Epidemics are a phenomenon in biology, but they have profound social consequences. A chemical discovery will transform the lives of millions of people socially. Look at what's happening now, because we now have ways of keeping people alive much longer than they were. That's a bit of medicine, that's a bit of biology, profound social consequences. So the one item that's in common is the social world. It's got myriad aspects. So linguistics, history, economics, anthropology, geography, even geology is all part of sociology in a certain sense. The object of study is the same, but the methods of study are vastly different.
From outside the social sciences, there's often the prejudice that social scientists tend to be relativists, whereas natural scientists think, on the whole, that they are discovering something about the way the world is. Social scientists are prone to say, well, there are many different ways of describing the world. There's no one God's eye view that we can discover.
Well, certainly, let's say 50 years ago, the natural scientists were going for the truth. And it didn't matter where you did it or who you were or which laboratory you worked in, you were on the road to the truth. But in sociology, gradually it became clear that the societies you were looking at were really very different from one another. What counted as a good marriage in Namibia wouldn't have counted as a good marriage in New York. So the idea that there were different societies so different that each one had to be tackled separately, that was an important insight. But suddenly, about 40, 50 years ago, natural scientists began to ask themselves the question, if I had been brought up in a different way and worked in a different laboratory with a different set of instruments, with different assistants helping me, would I have come up with the same answer? What we're getting is a series of snapshots around a common core, which is the world out there. So in physical sciences, I'm notorious as a philosophical realist. I think we're studying reality, but we're taking shots from different points of view. It's not true in the social sciences, because there isn't a world out there. There are any number of different practices that people are engaged in. It's not that there's a series of snapshots. The snapshots are the object of enterprise. As I said at the beginning, the social world is a world we create. And in studying it, we're continuing to recreate it. Karl Marx sat in the British Museum studying British industrial society. Of course, what he then wrote down in Das Kapital became an instrument for the transformation of society itself.
Rom Harre, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
This podcast is made in association with Sage. Transcripts of the interviews are available at www.socialsciencebites.com.